Hello, everyone. Happy September, and welcome to another episode of the Assassin's Creed Book Club. Today, we'll be covering the Assassin's Creed Last Descendants Locus comics. Before we do that, we'll note that the book for September is Assassin's Creed Uprising, Volume 1, titled Common Ground. So this is the convergence of the Assassins and Templars comics, and this is the series that is going to be finishing off the Project Phoenix storyline. So very excited to finally dive into this. Now, as always, we had a giveaway, and congratulations to the winners of the giveaway. If you did not win a copy, please feel free to pick up a copy by using the Amazon affiliate link in the video description below. All right, let's dive into Last Descendants Locus. Overall, I had kind of mixed feelings about it. There were some parts I liked, some I didn't. Probably the most mixed feelings I've had on any of the comics that we've read so far. We'll jump into the likes. The first thing I liked about this comic series was being able to see the Last Descendants visually portrayed in the modern day. You know, we've been reading two of the books so far, and it's interesting to kind of see how the visuals of all these different characters and the setting kind of line up to what was going on in my head. Especially since we don't really get a lot of visual information from the covers of the books. It's kind of just like, oh, here they are in assassin outfits, and it doesn't really translate to what is actually contained in the story. But people like Sean looked exactly like I thought he would. The whole Abstergo Center pretty much looked as identical as, and everything pretty much lined up to my to kind of how I had pictured things in the book. The one exception might be Natalia. She was like a little more model-esque than I thought. She was kind of like drawn really, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. She looked really, really stunning, like more so than I would have anticipated from just how she was portrayed in the book, I guess. But overall, it was really cool. I like getting the visual reference for the modern day of the Last Descendants storyline. The other thing I liked is the kind of main historical story between Tommy and Alice. I think Tommy was a pretty good character in the first Last Descendants book. It was great to see him again. And Alice, she came off as maybe just a little, maybe one note-ish in the beginning when you first encounter her, but over time, you kind of get a little more sense of her personality and kind of like her playfulness with Tommy, even though they're kind of enemies. And I thought that was actually pretty well done. I kind of really enjoyed their little back and forth, and it was a little sad how it ended. But yeah, so that's going to cover it for the likes. I have one mixed feeling that I have. It's about the art style used in the book. So the art style is definitely different from a lot of the other comics we've covered. It's got a lot, the outlines on everything are a lot thicker. Everything looks a little bit more cartoony. Most of the time this works for me. It's okay. I can totally understand this is kind of geared towards a younger audience, so that more cartoony look, I guess, is more appropriate. Personally, I'm more of a fan of like the Black Cross, like the Templars comic series. I thought the art in that has been my favorite so far. Most of the time it worked. Sometimes it didn't really. Some of Alice's expressions seemed to be kind of fixed, almost like her face was frozen in this permanent single expression. I don't know. Maybe you know what I'm talking about, maybe you don't. And then there's at least every once in a while there will just be this really weird depiction of someone. Like there's this one shot of Isaiah where he looks really weird. I don't know what happened. It's hard for me to describe, but there's certain panels and portrayals where every once in a while something will crop up and I'm like, that just doesn't look right. And so overall, kind of mixed feelings towards the art style, but leaning towards, I was able to, it didn't bother me too much throughout reading the comics. All right, now let's get on to the couple of dislikes that I have. First dislike I'm going to list is Henry and Evie. Not that I dislike the characters, I love the characters, but I feel like they were very kind of superfluous in the story. We don't really learn anything new about them, and they're not really even in the story that much, is what I would argue. I feel like you could easily replace their characters with a couple more of like Tommy's Pinkerton agent friends, and it wouldn't change the story at all. Like, it really felt like they were shoehorned in, and then they didn't do much with the characters. And it's almost like a little reminiscent of Ezio's cameo in Homecoming, which we read last month, in that just feels kind of shoehorned in, and they don't really do anything with the character. And if that's going to be the case, then honestly, personally, I would prefer if they just don't include the characters at all. Because, and especially in the case of Last Descendants Locus, it's a little different than Homecoming, because Last Descendants Locus, they literally have Henry Green on the cover of the comic. The back of it kind of advertises that it involves Henry and Evie, so they really play up that aspect of it. But I felt the payoff didn't really fulfill what they had been promising, and so I was pretty disappointed in how Henry and Evie were portrayed. It was kind of just like, oh yeah, here they are, and here they'll do like one or two things, but you don't get any insights into their characters really or anything, and they're just kind of there. The other dislike is going to be the precursor box. Okay, now those of you who have followed me for a while know I have many issues with the precursor box. I think it's probably the dumbest thing they've ever introduced into the Assassin's Creed universe. I could make a whole video about all my issues with the precursor box in general, like as a concept, and maybe I will at some point. Not really going to cover that here. In this video, I'm just going to mainly kind of focus on the things that are unique to this story that I dislike about the precursor box. The first is that it feels a little inconsistent to me that the Trident even needs instructions to be used in the first place, right? The whole thing about this is like, oh, we need this precursor box so that we can translate these pages of the Voynich manuscript so that we can learn how to use the Trident. It seems ridiculous to me when every other piece of Eden in the series has been portrayed as being extremely intuitive to use, to the point where people just pick it up and they know how to use it. I don't understand why the Trident suddenly needs a whole instruction manual to figure out what to do with it. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. The other thing that I dislike about the precursor box and how it's portrayed in this is they introduce it at the beginning of the story when Alice grabs it from the pillowcase, you remember? And then she like runs out with it, and she has this precursor box, and then she picks up the pages of the manuscript. Eventually you see her on the boat at the end of the story, throwing herself and the pages into the sea to be lost forever. But it begs the question, what happens to the precursor box? She could have left it with somebody in London, sure, or sent it somewhere, but then that begs the question, why didn't she also send the pages along with it? Why did she have to try to smuggle the pages out of London and not the precursor box? Like, it just drives me nuts that this thing just gets like introduced and then just dropped, and it's like, was it important? Do we need to know where this precursor box is in the universe of Assassin's Creed? Like, what is going on? Why on earth does she not have it with her with the pages? Because it seems like anything she could do to hide the box could also mean she could hide the pages and therefore not have to take that first boat out of London, etc., etc., etc. I think you guys get the point. I feel like it was something that was brought up and then just immediately paid no more attention to, and I thought that was really crappy. All right, that's going to wrap up my thoughts on Last Descendants Locus. Let me know what you guys thought. Overall, I felt it was it was okay. There were aspects of it that I liked, as I mentioned before, but overall, it did feel a little disposable. So I'm not like super crazy, especially when there's a huge amount of different comics that are being released. It feels like this is one of the ones that they pretty easily could have cut out if they wanted to, and nothing of value would really be lost, in my opinion, in the overall story. Anyway, before we wrap up, let's get back to a real quick comment from last month's discussion on Assassin's Creed Homecoming, Volume 3. We have a comment here from Andy Clark, and this is with regards to Ezio. One of the problems I had with Ezio in Homecoming is that he's supposed to be retired by the time that the story takes place, but he's shown training, the two assassins just like it's nothing. He's just kind of casually just training them, even though he's supposed to be retired. And I had a big problem with this. And so Andy Clark says, with a comment, this is an excerpt of his comment. He says, Ezio did not retire completely when he got back from his trip. He simply took the true role of mentor and became a teacher before he completely retired as mentor. It's even talked about in the Assassin's Creed Revelations novelization. The game simply ended his adventures, but not his role in the Brotherhood until he had children. Okay, so I haven't read the novelization for Assassin's Creed Revelations, so I'm glad you brought this up, Andy. Thank you for the comment. I did a little. I am aware that the novelization contains a few things aside from the games. It covers, as far as I know, it covers like Ezio's marriage to Sophia. I think he visits Leonardo when he dies as well, and it talks about him retiring like this. I was actually not aware there was a slight gap where he was not, between the end of Revelations where he was still considered mentor of the Assassins before he passed on. So I did some research, mainly on the Assassin's Creed wiki, and I still stand by my earlier criticism of this because the timeline still does not line up. Here is the timeline of events. From 1510 to about 1512, you have the events of AC Revelations. 1513, Ezio retires from the Brotherhood, and he appoints Lodovico, I hope I said that right, Lodovico Ariosto as mentor in his place. This is also when his daughter Flavia is born. 1 year later, 1514, Marcello is born, and then 1515 is the events of Homecoming as they're portrayed with Ezio. So, at the point where you see Ezio in Homecoming, he is already retired, passed on the mantle of mentor 2 years ago, and had both of his children. So I don't think the timeline supports this idea that he is in this gap period where he is still a mentor but not going off on adventures, which was only about like a year, it seems like. Anyway, between 1512 and 1513. Homecoming takes place 1515. At this point, he should be retired. And even if, I think my broader point is that even if they had put in something, they had said, oh, okay, but he was retired, but he decided to take on 2 more trainees just because. It's still completely, in my opinion, even if they try to explain it away like that, it still works to undermine the narrative impact of Ezio retiring at the end of Revelations. And so I'm still not, like, even if they had tried to explain it away, which they didn't, I would still have an issue with fundamentally undercutting the ending of Revelation's story, which is very emotional and like really important to the development of Ezio's character. But yes, anyway, thank you, Andy, for the comment, spurring me on to kind of research this more, even though I disagree with the conclusion, of course. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed this month's reading, and I will see you again very soon for the month of October. Sorry, my brain's a little dead today. I'll see you in a month in October where we'll cover Uprising, and we'll move on to probably Reflections and or some of the Origins stuff. Origins coming out in 2 months, of course. For all, it's getting pretty exciting times for Assassin's Creed. We'll see how all the modern day stuff shakes out with these comics and everything. But thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in a month. Bye.